Hello everyone, this is Showtime 112. We recently took a deep dive into a dramatic dogfight between US Navy Hellcats and multiple Japanese fighter types that took place on August 15, 1945, just minutes after the Japanese Emperor's surrender speech was broadcast to the nation. That battle is a strong contender for the title of The Last Dogfight of World War II. If you missed that video, make sure to check it out. But on that very same morning, and not too far away, another fierce aerial clash unfolded between Allied and Japanese pilots. This time it was the Royal Navy Seafires, the naval variant of the legendary Spitfire, that took to the skies. The battle is also a contender for the title of the last dogfight of World War II, even though it likely happened at least an hour before the US Navy engagement. So, what was the Royal Navy doing over Japan in the first place? Let's rewind a few years. When World War II broke out, the Royal Navy didn't have any modern monoplane fighters on their aircraft carriers. They solved this problem in two ways. First, by purchasing dedicated carrier fighters like the Wildcat, Hellcat, and Corsair from the Americans. And second, by adapting British fighter designs for naval service. The first of these was the Sea Hurricane, but the Navy really wanted the Spitfire. Early naval Spitfires were created by modifying existing Mark 5B and 5C airframes, which became known as the Seafire Mark 1B and Mark 2C respectively. But the ultimate wartime version was the Seafire Mark III, introduced in 1943 with two sub-variants, the F and the L. Unlike earlier models, the Mark III featured folding wings, making it much more suitable for carrier operations, though the Spitfire's narrow, delicate landing gear was never ideal for life at sea. In fact, most Seafire losses during the war were due to operational mishaps rather than enemy action. When the Royal Navy committed its carriers to the Pacific in November 1944, about a third of its fighter force consisted of Seafire Mark IIIs, with the rest made up of Hellcats and Corsairs. The Seafire was still essentially based on the Spitfire Mark V from 1941. But similarly, their main opponent, the Imperial Japanese Navy, was still relying heavily on the Mitsubishi A6M-0, albeit in its later variants. The Japanese did develop more advanced fighters, but never in large enough numbers to make a real difference. After the atomic bombings in August 1945, the Allies expected Japan to surrender at any moment, but they continued launching airstrikes against the dwindling number of available targets. A reduced British force, centered around the aircraft carrier HMS Indefatigable and a group of supporting ships, operated alongside American Task Force 38, just south of Japan. On August 13th, the British carrier launched airstrikes in the Tokyo area, and with no sign of surrender, more attacks were planned for the morning of the 15th. At 4 a.m., a flight of Fireflies took off on a ramrod mission, followed by 6 Avengers, escorted by 8 Seafires from 887 and 894 Naval Air Squadrons. 5 Seafire L Mark IIIs, led by Sub-Lieutenant Fred Hockley, provided close cover, while 3 Seafire F Mark IIIs, led by Sub-Lieutenant Victor Loden, flew as top cover. Their original target was Kisarazu Airfield, but with Kisarazu shrouded in clouds, they switched to their secondary target, a chemical factory near Odaki Bay. Despite being badly battered, the Imperial Japanese Navy could still mount air defense sorties. 2 units in the area, the 302nd and 252nd Kokutai, scrambled to intercept the Allied strike. While sources differ on which unit fought which Allied force, it's most likely that the British Seafires encountered 8 or 9 Zeros from the 252nd Kokutai, led by Lieutenant Commander Moriyasu Hidaka. 14 Royal Navy aircraft climbed through low clouds, breaking into clear skies at 6,000 to 8,000 feet. As they crossed Tokyo Bay, they spotted two Zeros flying well below the Avengers, a classic decoy tactic. The British pilots chose to ignore them. But just minutes later, at 5:45 a.m., about a dozen more Zeros came diving in from 3 o'clock. The top cover pilots gave the warning, and most of the close cover Seafires took evasive action, except for one. Sub-Lieutenant Fred Hockley's radio had failed, and he never heard the alert. He was shot down in the first pass. One Japanese pilot from the 252nd Kokutai, Saburo Abe, claimed a Seafire kill on August 15th, but his account of the battle differs significantly. Abe describes a chaotic fight, struggling to identify targets until he spotted a Seafire to his right. He banked his Zero and closed in. Insecure about his gunnery skills, Abe waited until he was just 20 meters away before firing. The Seafire pilot looked back just as Abe pulled the trigger, and Abe saw the pilot's head blown off by his shots. However, British sources tell a different story. According to them, Sub-Lieutenant Fred Hockley, flying the only Seafire lost in this battle, survived being shot down. He parachuted safely and surrendered to an air raid warden, only to be handed over to the army. Tragically, the Japanese army executed him that same day. Two officers responsible for this were sentenced to death by hanging in 1947, and a third received 15 years in prison. Meanwhile, one of the Avengers was badly damaged in the surprise attack. Its pilot, Sub-Lieutenant Baldwin, eventually ditched the plane alongside a radar picket destroyer. A Japanese online source notes that two pilots from the 252nd Kokutai, Sergeant Katsuyoshi Yoshida and Lieutenant Tadahiko Honma, claimed shooting down Avengers, and that Sergeant Yorinashi claimed downing a Seafire. As the first wave of Zeros moved out of range, the surviving Seafire pilots braced for a second attack. Sub-Lieutenant Loden, leading the top cover flight, moved his formation into a line abreast and engaged an oncoming Zero head-on, opening fire from about 800 yards and scoring solid hits. His number 3, Sub-Lieutenant Taffy Williams, also hit the enemy and shared in the victory. Even with his left cannon jammed, Loden attacked another Zero from 250 yards, and 3 short bursts caused it to explode. He went on to damage 2 more Zeros, while Taffy Williams claimed a solo kill in addition to his shared victory. Sub-Lieutenant Jerry Spud Murphy, flying close escort, noted that the initial Japanese attack was well coordinated, but the enemy pilots quickly lost cohesion. Murphy and his leader fired on a Zero from behind, scoring hits before his leader finished it off. This may have been Lieutenant Saburo Abe, who described being hit by 2 enemy fighters shortly after his own victory claim. Abe was wounded in the leg and forced to crash land his aircraft. Murphy then broke off to attack another Zero, 500 feet below and to the left. He saw his shots hit, but he then overshot the target. Pulling up to re-engage, he spotted a Zero at his level in a shallow right turn. Murphy closed to within 100 yards, apparently unnoticed, and opened fire. His shot set the Zero ablaze, sending it plunging into the clouds. Sub-Lieutenant Duncan claimed 2 probable kills out of 3 Zeros he engaged. His section leader, Sub-Lieutenant Randy Kay, attacked a Zero closing in on the Avengers, setting it on fire from behind. He then targeted another Zero, firing a deflection shot and shooting it down. All told, Royal Navy Seafire pilots claimed 7 Zeros shot down in this battle, with another 4 damaged. The Avengers were able to strike their targets and return safely to the carrier, except for the one mentioned earlier. The Japanese online source I referenced earlier states that in addition to 3 victory claims by the 252nd Kokutai, the unit lost 3 pilots, Sergeants Ogami, Sugiyama, and Okimura. On the other hand, Donald Nybur's book, Seafire vs. A6M0, lists the 252nd Kokutai's claims as high as 9, with 4 more damaged. With so many conflicting reports, we may never know the full truth about the details of this battle, or the one fought by the US Navy Hellcats. How many kills were scored by the involved pilots and which Japanese unit faced which Allied formation? As is so often the case in history, we're left to make our best educated guesses. Let us know in the comments what you thought of this video, and as always, keep watching Showtime 112.